Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great weekend and that you are looking forward to our live today. I do apologize that I did not have one last week. I had some technical difficulties with my Facebook, but I am back and we are going to have a really good time today. So the pattern that we're going to use today is Vega. I'm going to be honest, Vega is not one of my top favorite patterns, but I think it's really important to sometimes come back and to revisit patterns that maybe you haven't used in a long time, or that you never really had a chance to fall in love with. And sometimes when you do that, you end up finding a new favorite pattern. So my hope is that you will give this pattern a shot like I did, and that you may find some love for it, or maybe you have some, or maybe it will spark some ideas for other patterns that are similar, a border pattern, or a rope type pattern that will give you an idea that you can go off in a new and fun way. So I'm going to give it another minute. I see I have a couple people joining. Good morning, Vicki. I think I have my focusing issues resolved, but as always, if I go blurry, please let me know, because I'm looking at my tiles and my hands and my pen and not necessarily at the screen. So if there is something that you see that I can correct, please let me know. Alright, we're going to dive right into this. Give me 1 second here and I will get a new tile. And then before I actually start drawing, I'm going to talk just a couple minutes about what I've done already. Good morning, Sue. So this is our standard. I always say standard in air quotes, but this is the way I learned to draw this pattern, with a slight variation. The way I learned to draw it was to color all of these little shapes in solid. I have never been great at that. My stuff looks kind of wonky. So because of that, I find that if I'm drawing a Vega string, a Vega pattern, that if I add a little more to it, a little more detail, that the wonky doesn't show quite as much, and I like it a little better. So this is the standard pattern. And then this one I did just to show you, and this isn't Vega, that's just some line work, but this is to show you that by using the same pattern and just changing out the colorization, here I just did some shading, and here I did the solid black. You can complete a tile using, basically just the one pattern and get very, very different contrast. Here I did this pattern, and what I did with this one is I rounded things just a little bit. So instead of having sharp, crisp edges on it, I kind of made like almost little bubbles, like I squished in water balloons into my Vegas in order to give me kind of a border. And then this one I did in a round, like part of a spiral, and then I filled in some of my sections with print humps. So, and then I just accented it with a couple of other little leaves, using some flux. So I wanted to show this one because I think that it's a nice contrast, kind of florally, kind of delicate looking, when compared with this very graphic, very sharp kind of way of doing Vega. So with that, those are the ones that I've done so far. I'm going to start out by showing you how to draw Vega, and then I will show you a couple other ways to use it. Good morning, Barbara. Let's see if I have anybody else. All right. Sounds good. So I am going to move these off to the side. And then I'm going to grab my tile, my pencil, do my dots, and my border. I hope everyone's having a really nice week. The weather here is beautiful. I know that not everyone has been so lucky, but I've got, I think it's about 80 degrees here today, and the sun is out, and yesterday there was a nice breeze. I actually slept with my window open, which was nice. But I don't know how long that's going to hold, so we shall see. Alright, so I have my border, and sometimes if I'm drawing just a monotangle, I don't necessarily always draw my border and or a string, but I usually try and do that in these lives, simply because I think it's really important to just kind of bring this back to the basics of tangling, to remember, pay attention to my lines, pay attention to my breathing. I always like to have a beverage, whether it's a cup of tea, or if you've been in some of my my mindfulness classes, I encourage people to bring water, because I think that it is very, very important to be mindful of our water consumptions. We're all a little dehydrated. So, alright, I am going to start. I'm going to draw my first line. I always tend to draw on a slight diagonal when I'm doing just one pattern. So this pen isn't working great. Let me swap this out for another one. There we go. So I draw my line. I'm going to leave some space to work in, and I'm going to create an aura. With this pattern, I think auras are really, really important, because in order to get the shaping and the spacing right, I think that the aura really becomes a key piece. So I have my two lines here creating this pathway, this ribbon, this rope, however you choose to look at it, a road. And now I'm going to start. I'm going to make some lines kind of at a little diagonal going across, right? And now I'm going to turn my tile a little bit, and I'm going to draw an aura on each of these. And these can be as thin or as thick as you like them to be. Changing that up will change the look of this pattern completely. Okay, and now I'm going to come in, and I'm going to start at the tip of this one, and I'm going to bring it across in the opposite direction. I'm going to use that halaba method so that I'm drawing behind. So I bring my pen down till I get to this line. I pick up my pen, jump over the lines that are already there, and pick it back up on the other side. When we use the halaba method, we don't draw over a line that's already there. And if you remember that, you'll always do it correctly, and that will let you create that illusion that one line is behind another. So I'll do that again. I'm going to start here. I'm going to draw my line. And this one's not going to make it all the way over here without looking a little weird. So I'm just going to end it there. I'm going to come back. I'm going to create an aura of that. Okay. And then again. So what I'm going to end up with is what looks like a series of X's. So it kind of looks like we had maybe a rope that we then wrapped with twine. Okay. Now here's the part where I find that a lot of people struggle, is they try and come in and they try and make diamond shapes, or they try and make triangle shapes. Because if you look at the finished pattern, that's what it looks like. What I have discovered is that if I come in and I look at the lines that are there, and I create an aura following the lines, that I get a much nicer result than trying to squish in something that maybe doesn't actually fit. So by paying attention to those lines, to really just echoing what we've already drawn, will give you a crisper, more satisfying result. And as you can see, if I had squeezed in a diamond, I would have not quite fit the shape that was there. And that's really important, because that's part of what makes this such a cool pattern. As I go and I fill these in, I try and keep my line spacing about the same on all of them. And you can mix it up, change things a little bit. It's entirely up to you, but that will give you a different look. And sometimes that's what we want. Sometimes we want that varied, wonky, kind of almost reckless little pattern. But because this is such a precise pattern, I like to try and keep everything all the same. There we go. So once I have that all drawn in, I'm going to come in and I'm going to color that. This one I'm going to do in black, but like I said, I often use a pattern inside these little shapes. You could actually go in and you could use a pattern on the X's too if you'd like. There's lots of little pieces again to use variations on. So today I'm just going to color this in, mostly for speed, but I'm just using a graphic, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to color in my little shapes. I usually use an 01. Lately I've been using a PN a lot, just because I find that I have been using really hard pressure, and I find that I'm going through my 01s pretty quick because I keep breaking the nibs. So until I get the pressure on my pen back under control, I have been using the plastic nibbed pen, which are very nice. They're about a 5, so they're not quite as tiny as the 01, but I can still get really good detail work. Today I am actually using an 01, but I may change that up as we go. You saw in the beginning I already had a problem with one of my pens, so we'll see. We'll see. And that's a me thing. That's not a micron issue. It's the way I'm holding and using my pen these days. And you may discover that as you tangle, that at different times you do better with one pen than another. And that's okay. Sometimes I actually tangle with my graphic, just because I want a nice bold line. And you can't get anything much bolder. Well, I mean, you could, but not and still get detail. So I'm just gonna color this all in. I find this super relaxing. I love the sound of my pen on the paper. I love watching the crispness as I come in with my pen and I watch that nice rich ink go onto the white paper. I find it super soothing, and I love the way that it fills in. But something to keep in mind as you shade and things later, that we are using a cotton paper, and when I use a graphic, I'm laying down a lot of ink. It's thirsty paper, and this is a nice juicy pen, so I usually want to give it a minute or so before I shade, because otherwise you may end up with some smudgies. Also, if you are a lefty, something to keep in mind is you do want to try not to drag your hand over an area like this that has so much black ink on it, because it may smudge. Okay, so as you can see, this comes together pretty quickly, and if you draw it large, it fills up a lot of space pretty quick as well. So that is Vega in its most simple and basic form. If I'm going to add some shading, because there's so much black, I don't usually bother to go with my pencil over the black because it sometimes looks shiny, and I don't always like that. So I'm just coming in with my graphite, and I'm adding a little bit of my graphite on either side. I'm going to add just a touch where these X's crisscross. So where it looks like one is laying over the other. And then I'm going to come in with my tortillon, and I'm going to lightly soften. Now, this is a nice little teeny tiny tortillon. I don't even know where I got it, but I love it. I have a couple in this size, and I like them for this teeny tiny shading and detail work. It lets me get into these little spots and just add the hint of shading, where if I came in with like this one, it would add more gray and it wouldn't look as delicate. So now I'm actually going to bring my bigger tortillon, and I'm going to smudge the areas on the edge, and I'm going to pull that in a little bit so that it's going to give me a curve, because shading is where the magic happens, right? Okay, so there we go. So that is Vega in its most simplistic. Good morning, Debbie. How are you? I know that it is not morning in your little corner of the world, but I am glad that you made it. So here's Vega. I'm going to set this one off to the side. I'm actually going to come back and let's see. Which one should I revisit? I want to talk about using Vega to add patterns to. So like on this one, I added the pattern into the diamonds, but if I were to draw another one, maybe behind it, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did just a minute ago, I'm going to add these crisscrossy lines, and here I just kind of pretended I drew behind so I could see where it would be. So I'm just adding another row of the Vega. Only this time, instead of putting my pattern into these diamond shapes, I'm going to come in and I'm going to put my pattern into those little X's. Okay, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to focus my detail this time on these little X's. And all I'm doing is some simple little line work here, similar to the lines that I used to fill these in. And that will help to unify the tile by using that same pattern over and over and over again. And it's a nice way to add some variety and to still keep everything kind of cohesive. So I think this one in the background now looks a little boring. So what I might do is I might come in with my graphic and I might just accent these lines. Make them a little darker. My lines aren't going to be as crisp using a graphic because it's wider, but that's okay. Okay, So then I'm going to come in, and I have a lot of graphite on this tortillon already, so I'm not going to really add any more, but I'm just going to very, very lightly lay down some of what I have on my tortillon in these little diamond shapes now. Okay, and then because one looks like it's laying over the other, I am going to add some darker shading by laying down my graphite on either side. Come back in with my tortillon and soften that up. Right? So that now it looks like one is laying on top of the other. I also want this one to look curved because this one looks curved. So again, a little bit of graphite here at the bottom and at the top, a little smudgies. And there we go. And you could use this as a string all in itself. So you could do these, and then you could put other tangling around, or you could just leave it as is. But since we're talking about using this as a string, I want to talk about using Vega as a fill pattern. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that super well, but I actually drew out quandary in a pattern because I want to use Vega to fill in these quandary petals. If I wanted to, I could also have used Vega in these negative space, but we're not going to, not today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and I drew this out in advance to save a little bit of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a couple of these petals, and you'll be able to see the whole thing completed when I post the pattern sheet later today. So for now, I'm just going to do a couple of these little petals so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. My goal and my hope when I do these lives is that I give you some fun ideas, something you can do, and a new way to play with it. So I'm going to draw my diagonal lines across one petal. I'm going to come in and aura those. Then I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to make my crisscross lines so that I have my X's. I feel like this one needs another little one right there. Okay, move on to the next one. Sometimes I draw my auras right as I draw that initial line. That's entirely up to you. And sometimes I draw all my first lines and then I come back and I add my aura. It really depends on what kind of mood I'm in that day. Okay, so I've got two. I'm going to do one more. See, there I go again, where I'm just drawing the line and not necessarily doing my aura. So it really just depends on any given day. I kind of change it up here and there, right? And that's okay. It's a nice part about tangling is we can kind of do whatever works for you. There we go. Alright, so I have my 3 petals done. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to aura these shapes. So these little interior lines that I have. And again, I'm just paying attention to what's there. So this line goes like this one goes like this. I turn my tile, I'm auraing that. I'm not just drawing a diamond and trying to squish it in. There are lots of patterns where we just squish stuff in. This is one that I find the results are much more satisfying and much more pleasing if you actually pay attention to just auraing. Okay, so there's that one. I'm going to move on to this one. And I probably am going to shade in these little diamondy shapes. I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to fill them in with their own pattern or if I'm just going to color them in. And that's something that I would love to see. What do you think? I would love to see your thoughts. Would you like to see these colored in? Would you like to see these little shapes with their own pattern? Let me know in the comments, and then I can work from there. And you know, you could make this same tile 3 or 4 different ways by just changing up those little details. So let me see, I'm going to take a sip of my tea because I haven't had enough caffeine yet this morning. Alright, so like I said, I would love to get your feedback on what you want me to do on the insides there. I'm going to do another one just while I'm waiting. Should we leave them empty? Should we color them in? Should we add another pattern? The options are really kind of endless, which is why I'm not great with decisions first thing in the morning, so I'm kind of hoping you'll make some. Alright, so as you can see, this pattern comes together pretty quickly. It always looks very, very intricate, but the strokes are all pretty simple, and because of that, it doesn't take a very long time to do. Okay, so I'm not getting any feedback on what we should do, so I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to fill in these little diamond shapes with a different pattern. So I want to do something simple because we have a lot going on. So I think I'm just going to go with something that's a little opposite what we have going on with the graphic X's and things like that, and I'm going to go with X's and O's. So I'm going to use some tipple. So I'm just squishing in some little bubbles into these shapes, and the roundness of the little bubbles of my tipple shape is going to work nicely with the shape of my quandary. And you could have gone with, you know, a straight lined pattern. You could, you know, I see Jean just responded, and I think probably because there's usually a little lag, and I always think that people aren't responding, and then I get impatient. But you had said fill it in or go with a large dot, and that would have looked really cool And what I think I'm going to do, because I like that idea, is I'm going to alternate. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 6 petals in this. So I'm going to alternate it. So I have some with tipple, and then maybe I will come in here, and in the center of each of these I will squish in a big bubble. And then color around the outside. And that's going to give me kind of the best of both worlds. I'm going to have some petals that are going to be darker, I'm going to have some that are going to be lighter, and it's really going to have a super fun pattern when it's all finished. Okay, so I have those 2. Again, I would just come in, and then in this one I would do tipple, and you could make them all different. There's so many different ways to go, so many different avenues to explore. I had a conversation way back when I first got certified. I had a conversation with Rick Roberts, and we were talking about patterns, and I remember I was feeling a little overwhelmed at the time, and I had said to him, I really don't know how I'm going to remember all of these patterns. And he told me that tangling isn't worrying about knowing all of the patterns, that if you only knew a handful of patterns and you mixed them up and you changed them up, you could make art for the rest of your life. And that stuck with me, and I have often thought about that. And Sonia Yancer and Chris Letourneau wrote a book kind of on that concept at one point, and if you don't have it, it's one of the handful of tangling books that I do recommend to all of my students, and it's called Pattern Play, and it is very much along the lines of what I do here, which is to take a pattern and to change it up. We get stuck in these ruts and we draw things the same way all the time, and by changing that, by using the patterns in a different way, or using different type of line work, or thinking outside the box, we can end up with really different results. So there's a CZT, and I can't think of her name offhand, unfortunately, mostly because I didn't plan on talking about it today, but the only pattern she draws is paradox, and I've never been bored looking at her work. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish this one later, but you can see how just adding that, they don't even look like the same pattern, really. You can see that there is, that you can see that there's similarities, but you can also see at the same time that these have kind of run in a million different directions, because that's how my brain works. So I will come back and I will finish this one. I did want to show, and this one is something that I like to show sometimes, and that is almost like a macro of this pattern. So with that in mind, it's funny I said that, and I'm going to come back to this pattern, or this one that I did. So a macro or a fragment, right, is going to be taking your pattern and kind of zooming in. So if we think about what we did here today, right, I made those 2 showing how you can put your pattern in your diamonds, or you can put your pattern in your X's. I created its own diamond shape, or its own crisscross. So I could come in and I could aura these lines like this, right? So I'm creating an aura here, and I'm creating those shapes. So it's like I zoomed in on this piece of the pattern. And sometimes that creates a great amount of interest all in itself. So I added my auras, so now I have what are partial diamond shapes going on. And I can come back and I can add a little bit of shading. And I always like it when a tile that I wasn't quite sure how I was going to finish, or if I thought it was finished, and then I look at it and I think, oh, what if and then I did something else, and all of a sudden the tile goes in a completely new direction, and I knew that now it's done. So all I'm doing on these is I'm adding a little bit of shading to make these pop. And I tend to use my tortillon much like I use my pen or my pencil. I hold it, I use the side of it. I know a lot of people use little circles to drag their graphite around. I find that a little awkward. So if you ever see the way that I do it, I do go through a lot of tortillons. But there's not really a wrong way. So there you go, there's now a macro slice of this pattern. So I talk a lot about all the different things that we can do with a pattern. So using it in a curved or round area, using it as a border, using it by itself, changing up your colors or your fill pattern, and then using it as a macro, using the different areas to fill in with their own patterns, using it as a string. So that's the last thing I'm going to do today, is I'm going to quickly use this as my string. So I'm going to create one rope. I'm going to use the hollow bob method, and I'm going to add a couple more of these little ropes or strings or ribbons, however you choose to look at it. Okay. And then, why not? We'll do one more right here. Okay. So, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create my little X's. But as I do it this time, right, so I have these little X's that are going in. I want to add a little curve, because I'm going to come back and I'm going to actually color these in. Okay, and this is another tile because it's going to be a little more intricate, that I'm going to come in and I will finish it up later, but I wanted to start it. So I'm adding like a little bubble, and you could have drawn these lines in pencil and then curved your edges, and it's going to look like it's wrapping around. And if you'd done it in pencil, you wouldn't necessarily see where you add, like a little hat or a little bubble on there. But I did mine in ink because I knew I was going to color these in anyway. And by adding that roundness to your Vega, you're going to get more of like a little 3D effect. It's going to look like those X's are sitting up on those ribbons. Oh, good. I'm glad that everybody likes what I'm doing here. Hi, Brenda. I'm glad you made it this morning. So again, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to add in these little X's and round the edges. So I'm only going to do 2 of these ribbons, and then I'll finish the rest of it later. And I usually like when my Vegas try and connect, but I made these pretty far apart, so they're really not necessarily going to, and that's okay. If they don't actually match up, you end up with kind of a little bit of a different look, and that's okay. So I picked up my graphite to fill these in, just because that's faster. Okay, and then obviously I need one going in the opposite direction. So again, I'm going to make my X's. And when I stack them on top of each other like this, I like to pay attention so that I don't have them going into the one that's maybe directly behind it. I think that it's a nicer look if there's a little bit of space, because then you can see the 2 ribbons laying next to each other. So again, same concept. I am drawing in my X's. I'm gonna add that rounding by coloring these in. Okay, and if it was in pencil, I wouldn't necessarily worry about coloring them in, but I don't want this little edge to show, so. Plus, this lets me showcase kind of how I did this. So you can kind of see that it was just a line that I added a little bubble or a little hat on the end of. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to come back in. I'm going to add in my aura. So I'm going to aura that shape in each one by following along with those lines. You have the option, and this is what I wanted to show you, is you have the option of also adding that little bubble or that little hat onto these, right? So rounding it outside of your line. And when you come back in and you color it in, the whole thing takes on this texturized, it looks like these little pieces are actually standing off of that ribbon. Okay. So it adds a lot of nice little visual interest. It looks like it's bumpy, or not quite sure what the word I want to use is this morning. Words are hard some morning, friends. It's just, you know, you have them in your brain and you just can't think of which ones you want to use. But it actually looks like it has some texture instead of being a flat ribbon. And that's added, like I said, just by curving outside that initial ribbon that you drew. Okay. And then obviously I'm going to come back, and this is yet another way that you can change it up by doing your X's and your diamonds all in black or in a color. Or, you know, maybe you don't color them in at all, you leave them white and you do some little line work, or you leave them very delicate looking. I find that when you color things in dark, that it has a much bolder, you know, look at me kind of effect. And when you leave them just in the thinner, lighter pen work, that it is very, very much more delicate looking. So there we go. I would come back in and I would do some shading on this original line work. This one, like I said, I never loved a Vega, but I think there's a lot that can be done with it. And I think that we underestimate this pattern because we just see it as either a border or we see it as, you know, these ribbons, and we don't necessarily think about how we can use it in some different ways. So I hope that this has, you know, made you look at it again, made you think about maybe some new ways to use it and some ways to vary it in your work. And as always, the video will stay up so you can watch it as much as you'd like. Play with it, draw along, kind of follow along with, you know, some of my ideas, come up with some of your own. I look forward to seeing the things that you create and the things that you make. My pattern sheet will go up later this afternoon. I just want to finish these 2 tiles first. And yeah, so I'm really glad you made it this morning, and I will be talking to you soon. Next week I will be here again. Next week I think I am doing Ing. So Ing is a super fun pattern and one that I really enjoy. I think that if you haven't played with it yet, you will have a really good time. One last thing that I wanted to tell you is there is a new social media site called Tangy, and it is like TikTok or Vine used to be, only for makers. So everything is a minute or 2 minutes, and it's designed to teach little things. So I have been putting up some tangling videos. I was accepted as a creator over there about a week ago, so I just kind of dug in. I don't know how big it's going to be, or, you know, if it's never going to go anywhere, but I really liked the idea of bite-sized videos for people. So I'm over there under Whimsy by Kelly, and I will actually drop the link in the comments here if anybody wants to follow me over there and see what I'm doing. And I know many of you also are creators and makers and do some cool stuff too, so I thought maybe you would be interested in checking it out. So everybody have a great Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm going to go drink some more tea, and I don't know, maybe I'll take a nap. But everybody have a good day, and I will see you all soon.